For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. Whoever kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the testimony of witnesses. Notice that that's plural. But one witness is not sufficient testimony against a person for the death penalty. Now, God did not have juries and allow that. God had appointed judges. But they don't realize all those people are going to have their opportunity. God has the power of death, but he also has the power of life. This comes as no surprise to you, brethren, but God's ways and thoughts are not our ways and thoughts. Almost never. When it comes to the real truth of the matter on all subjects. And I'm going to speak on three things today. I have three things that show just how true this is. Because the society, our society, and I think what I see from what I can see over the many years, it's also true especially in the Western world, that society first starts to do wrong. They're taught correctly many times and taught from the Bible. But over the course of time, they start backsliding on various issues and various things. And I'm only going to talk about three of those. And most of those, all three, are directly or indirectly related to commandments of God. So it's just not suggestions that God gave the ancients. It was commandments that he gave them, and us, and all humanity. But the societies over time, even though they may have started out adhering to these things, even because it was not meant to be a mystery at all. Would God do that? Would God give his 10 commandments, for example, and want it to be a secret from anyone? And I have heard Protestant ministers in days gone by state that correct exactly, and ask the question: well, what is wrong with God's commandments? And what they're saying is that's a rhetorical question. There's nothing wrong with them, and that the Protestant world knew this at one time. But you'll see here as we talk about these three subjects. The first one will be the death penalty that God commanded to be given for murderers. If you look around the world here in the United States, the vast majority of people do not believe that. They believe that it's cruel and unusual punishment, or that it's just not right. In other words, they think that's too harsh. And what they're doing is they're thinking that they know better than God. Because God gave that, and we're going to see the price that it has cost us not to follow his instructions on it. Please turn, let's see here. Isaiah 55, please. And let's pick it up at 8, because here's where God says this. He states it. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts, in parentheses, higher thoughts than your thoughts. Of course, when we really think about this, brethren, we can realize, we can know that that's true. If you study and you realize that God is spirit, and we are flesh, there's a vast difference between the two. And so human beings, even though they were given correct ways in the beginning, over the many ages they've backslidden on many of these issues, and actually don't believe them, and certainly don't do them. But let's look in Numbers, where it talks about the death penalty for murder. Numbers 35. And let's pick it up in 30. So here's God's command on this. Whoever kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the testimony of witnesses. Notice that's plural. But one witness is not sufficient testimony against a person for the death penalty. Now, God did not have juries and allow that. God had appointed judges. And so if you were charged with a murder, then you would go before the judge. And of course, unfortunately today, judges are appointed, and it's unlike in the Old Testament. God had judges appointed in ancient times, and he saw that they were either doing correctly, judging rightly, or he removes them. If you're charged with murder in the ancient world, God realized people would murder, sadly. And so they would go before the judge, and the judge would hear their case. But whoever was charging them, alleging that they were a murderer, they had to have at least two witnesses. It couldn't be he said, she said. So many times today, in recent court trials you see today, one person makes a charge, another person tries to fight the charge that says they're not guilty, that they didn't do it, but they appoint a jury, and the jury then will convict one of the others. And it's not on it's on the allegation. In other words, the jury does not have to prove truth or not. Many times the jury is done in various ways. A preponderance of them or all of them have to agree. And so it often doesn't have anything to do with truth. And the two witnesses that witness the crime are either don't exist or aren't brought to the trial. Because I see this. It's on TV so often. I will catch a trial once in a while, the jury and so forth, and you'll see that that's so, brethren. The jury is not better than a judge appointed by God, or a judge appointed today, providing he can be removed if he does not judge. It can be proved that he does not judge rightly. And that's why many judges are not voted in. They're appointed, and then they can be taken out as well. And of course, in our laws, any judge can be removed by certain legal actions against him if they can be proved. Now, many times there's accidental. I don't have time to do it, but this is a good study, so please check this part, especially in Numbers. Many times a person kills somebody. It's not really murder. Murder is willful. Somebody intended to and kills a person. But many times a person is killed by accident. So what did God I can only cover a small part of that. In your reading in the context, you'll see that God gave, again, would have to go before the judge, that if it can be proved that it was accidental, then that person is not going to receive the death penalty that he would receive for a capital willful murder. But does he get off scot-free? No. God appointed that person that accidentally killed somebody had to go live in a place, a city of safety, and until the priest in that time, or whoever, in today's, if it was done today, it would be whoever is in charge or of that city, if they were in charge, until that person died, that person would have to live there. So that was still quite a penalty. But it wasn't like how many people are sentenced to death wrongly, and because there was no second option of that sort. Now, I don't think that's common, but it happens often. It's not rare when people are charged or convicted wrongfully. And that's why they stopped it. They stopped giving the death penalty. It makes sense to our minds, yes, but it didn't to God. That, look, mistakes are made, so we can't give people the death penalty because a mistake may be made. Well, that's true, but God's way would work far better, where the person, if two witnesses can prove that a person is murdered, either willfully or by accident, then God had a place for those accidental deaths. Those people still had a penalty to pay. And sometimes it wasn't like they could live their regular life in this particular city. And another reason God had them in that city, that God did allow people to take vengeance on murderers in the ancient times. He did allow. But they couldn't do it in anybody that resided in those safe cities. But if they went out of those cities, then they would fall under then a person that was relative of somebody they had murdered, even if it was an accident. That person could very well kill them. It's a penalty, but it's better than the death penalty, right? If everybody was charged that killed somebody, whether it was willful murder or accidental, that would be horrible, because I'm just guessing, I would say that most deaths are accidental. Or certainly not intended. So that's the first commandment that people don't like. If they know about it, whether they know about it or not, society has voted, I think, in a great preponderance not to use the death penalty for capital crimes. And look at the cost to us. America, the home of the land of the free and home of the brave, we have more people in prisons and jails, brethren, probably than any other country that we know of. Now, scratch China and 3 or 4 other nations, because we don't know. They're probably much greater than ours. But America has millions of people in jail or prison at a great cost to them and to the society. Well, there were no jails. God had no jails or prisons in the ancient world and intended not to have any. You had for capital crimes, you had the person got death. If it was accident, then we've covered that. That's how they were adjudicated. You got corporal punishment. God told his people that if people sin or if people damage things, hurt somebody, offended, and it could again be proved by 2 witnesses before the judge, they could receive so many stripes or lashes. and it had to be done in the presence of the judge. And 40 would be the maximum. Now, this isn't with a bat or something. This was done, if you read the history, even there are some nations, Madagascar still does this today. They give corporal punishment in Madagascar with canes, flexible cane, and they get so many whacks depending on the penalty due that's adjudicated by the judge. So they'll receive so many of those publicly before the judge. And so you had capital punishment, and a lot of people think that wouldn't work. Let me tell you. Imagine, okay, I hurt somebody. Well, and then I'm adjudicated, and it's proved that I can by 2 witnesses. Then the judge will say, okay, depending on the damage that I've done, and then he may judge me, he may appoint that I have to pay reparations as well. But forget about reparations, because as I say, please study that subject. He would get so many whacks with that cane, and it's not like it's drawing blood. And 40 would be the maximum. And the Jews always did 40 minus 1, because if God had told them, and the priests realized, if they gave more than 40, then they would be punished themselves, the one that was supposed to be overseeing it done correctly. And they would always they never gave 40. It was always 39, or 40 minus 1, 39, in case they miss a count. So that's the way it was handled. No prisons, no jails in God's ancient world, and nor did he intend for it. I rather imagine that'll carry through to the world tomorrow, brother. We have physical human beings during Christ's millennial rule. I think they will be publicly, they will go through this process. Remember, God has a way of doing things, they're perfect. God is perfect. So why wouldn't they? Now, I'm not saying that will absolutely happen, but I think that's the way it will be. And won't that be great? No jails, no prisons. And if you took so many whacks and publicly, don't think for a second that eventually, you might have to go 2 or 3 or 4 times before you learned your lesson, but eventually, in most cases, that did the job. It's never mentioned in the Bible that there was a problem with that corporal punishment. Properly given. And even today, parents can punish their children, corporal punishment, but if they do it wrong, if they are too harsh, then they will fall under a harsh law themselves. You don't have somebody, a judge, overseeing it, sadly, so many times the corporal punishment is wrongly done, so people just don't do it. Thing that the society has either agrees with or has accepted, a preponderance of our society, by law, by vote, has done this, is homosexualism. In its many forms, if you look it up in the lexicon, porno and so forth, you will find, let's look at this, let's look at Leviticus 18:22, please. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. Nor shall you mate with any animal, because people were doing that too, incredibly. But I have seen that in the news occasionally, even today. To defile yourself with it, nor shall any woman stand before an animal to mate with it. It is perversion. And of course, it just says here with a woman, you are not to lie, a male is not to lie with another man. And there's many scriptures on it. And mark up your notes. 1 Timothy, because I like to use the New Testament scripture on all of these. 1 Timothy 1, let's go to 8. Starting at 8. But we know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully, or you could say rightfully, knowing this, that the law is not made for righteous persons, but for the lawless and insubordinate, for the ungodly and for sinners, for the unholy and profane, for murderers, for fathers, murders of fathers and murders of mothers, for manslayers. And then it says in verse 10, for fornicators or sodomites, and then it continues on, kidnappers, liars, perjurers. So that homosexualism or of all kinds, and porno covers all kinds, not just, it's a root word for pornography, but it's more than just pictures. It's the whole realm of pervert actions and activities and behaviors. So it is accepted. And this is one thing that most countries even accept it more. I'm mainly talking about Western and European countries. They accept it more than we do. They think it's just as good and right as any other type of relationship. They don't feel a bit bad about it, rather they don't. Either accepting it or doing that behavior themselves. The third item is lying. Lying is in some ways the most commonly broken commandment. I can go back and hardly a day would go by if I was put under any pressure would I not lie. To get out of trouble or for all kinds of reasons. And so I used to have a secretary, and there'd be a call come in for me, and I was busy, and she'd say, Mr. Wright's out. Mr. Wright's not here, not in. And when I heard that, I told her, I said, please don't say that I'm out. Just take their number, and I'll get back to them as soon as possible. But I heard her say that often. So I called her on it because I was right there, and I didn't want her lying for me. Certainly. The most commonly broken commandment, I really think it is, brethren. Let's see. The last 40 or 50 years, lying is so more and more prevalent than it ever was. Years ago, 40 or 50 years ago, people knew that lying was wrong, and so it has really gotten bad, brethren, because lying is a way of life at all levels of society for many, many people. They don't think anything about it whatsoever, and how that's a very serious crime in God's sight, and one of the reasons why. Don't use Google if you want the final truth about the Bible. Check with Google, but if you see Google's really out of step with what you read in the Bible, well, you're going to find that often. I looked it up just to see what the Google had to say about lying, and I said, and I asked them to give me what they have on Satan being the father of liars. And you know the answer I got on Google? It says, the Bible doesn't state that Satan was the father of liars. And I thought, all right, well, that serves me right for looking it up in the first place. Let's look up, I want to close here. Let's look up John. That really got me. The Bible doesn't say that Satan was the father of liars. not only does the Bible not state it, Jesus himself here is talking. And in verse 44 of John 8, let's see. He's talking about them. He's talking to the Pharisees here. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. And isn't that right? Wasn't that the first lie? I'm just calling on my not-so-great short-term memory. But it's easy to remember in the Garden of Eden. The devil's telling, after God has told Adam and Eve what he wants them to do, then the devil tells them that it's no need to do it. That's not what God meant. Well, I guess that's the first lie we have written from the devil. And how disastrous was that? Eve got it, and later Adam did it, even though he realized, I think, that that wasn't correct. But you want to make your wife happy, don't you? I always think that was one of Adam's problems, but that's just my own thinking. So Satan, the father of liars, and it's a major tool that Satan uses in deceiving the whole world. I would say lying about things, or teaching lies, telling lies, and even when Satan does the half-truth is still a lie, brethren. As Jesus said, you cannot get pure water from a spring that is poisoned. A pure water spring, when you poison it when it has poison in it too, even though it's so much, half pure and half poison, so to speak, it's poison, period. So I think that's us further understanding these things more fully, brethren, will benefit. It certainly benefits me, because homosexuality has not been one of my problems. Thankfully, I have enough of my others. But lying and the death penalty in days gone by, I thought God was too harsh with it. Because God killed a lot of people. But always remember, when you see God doing things that are what you think are very, very harsh, God is perfect. He has the power of life and death. People that he has destroyed in the past, he will bring up in the future. And they will have their chance. But if you don't realize that, then you can understand why many people think that they see things that God did in the Old Testament. They thought that that's just too harsh. All the people before Noah. You don't have to convince anybody that in their own mind that's not pretty harsh. And people do. But they don't realize all those people are going to have their opportunity. God has the power of death, but he also has the power of life. And so God will show that everything that he does is righteous and true, as David said, altogether.